Your car is collecting over 100 data points on you every single drive. And in most states, your manufacturer has been legally selling all of it to your insurance company without telling you. Here's everything you need to know. I want you to think about the last time you got into your car. Maybe your Chevrolet, your Buick, your Cadillac, or any modern vehicle. You buckled your seatbelt, backed out of the driveway, and drove wherever you were going like you do every single day. But here is what was also happening during that exact same drive. Your car was recording your speed every 3 seconds, and I mean every 3 seconds. Not every few minutes, not occasionally, but continuously the entire time you were moving. It logged how hard you hit the brakes, it tracked whether you were touching your phone, and it recorded your exact GPS location. Not just the general area or the street you were on, but your precise position, updated every few seconds for the entire trip. And when you got home and parked in your driveway, that data didn't stay in your car. It left without you knowing, and in some cases, it ended up being used against you in a way that will cost you real money. It logged how hard you hit the brakes, it tracked whether you were touching your phone, and it recorded your exact GPS location. Not just the general area or the street you were on, but your precise position, updated every few seconds for the entire trip. And when you got home and parked in your driveway, that data didn't stay in your car. It left without you knowing, and in some cases, it ended up being used against you in a way that will cost you real money. I called my friend when I first started digging into this and told him what I found, and his exact words were, "There is no way that's legal." And until very recently, for most car manufacturers, it absolutely was. If this is your first time here, welcome. This channel breaks down new and changing driving laws in 2026, so you actually know what's happening on the road and what it means for your wallet. Before we get into everything, I have a question I want you to answer in the comments right now. True or false? Your car manufacturer is legally allowed to sell your driving data to insurance companies without telling you. Drop your answer down below, because I will give you the real answer before this video is over. And based on the research I did for this one, I think a lot of you are going to be genuinely surprised. 90% of new cars on the road today are tracking your driving every 3 seconds. And according to a CNN investigation from February of 2026, that is the baseline for nearly every new vehicle sold in the United States right now. We are talking about more than 100 individual data points per vehicle. How frequently you speed, whether you take sharp turns, how often you tailgate, when you brake suddenly, and the exact intersections you pass through every single day. Advanced systems can even detect when you are touching your phone screen, typing messages, or switching between apps while driving. And cameras inside some newer vehicles monitor whether you are paying attention to the road and can record what is happening inside your car while you drive. And it is not just General Motors doing this. The Mozilla Foundation, the organization behind the Firefox browser that has been reviewing tech privacy for years, found that Tesla ranked worst overall for privacy across the brands they studied, and that Nissan's privacy policy actually claims the right to collect information about your sexual activity and other intimate personal details. That is the kind of language buried in the privacy agreement you clicked through when you set up your car's app. Now here is the part that most people have never actually thought about. All of that data has a dollar value, and car manufacturers are selling it. Automakers pocket up to $100 per vehicle annually by selling your personal driving data to companies like LexisNexis, which then packages it up and sells it directly to insurance companies. And the vehicle data monetization industry as a whole is projected to reach $750 billion by 2030. And that number is built almost entirely on data collected from drivers who had absolutely no idea any of this was happening. What that data is being used for on the insurance side is this. It is being used to raise your premiums, and in some cases to deny you coverage outright. You never signed up for any monitoring program. You never agreed to be tracked. You just bought a car, downloaded the app that came with it, and drove your normal daily commute. And your insurance company received a detailed report on everything you did behind the wheel. Here is where the story gets even more specific. And this part I want you to pay close attention to because it already happened to real people. General Motors and their OnStar service were doing exactly this through a feature called Smart Driver, which was built directly into GM's connected car apps. Apps like My Cadillac, My Buick, and My Chevrolet. When drivers downloaded those apps, they were automatically enrolled into Smart Driver's data collection program, and the app tracked and rated their driving behaviors continuously without making it clear that was happening. That data was then sold to LexisNexis and a company called Verisk, both of which are data brokers that sell directly into the insurance industry. One driver who came forward during the investigation had been rejected by 7 different auto insurance companies before he even figured out what was going on. When he finally dug into why, he discovered that his driving data, collected through his GM vehicle without his meaningful knowledge or consent, had been sitting in a consumer reporting file that insurers were pulling every time he applied for coverage, and he had never enrolled in any driving program or agreed to share any of it. After the New York Times exposed this entire system in March of 2024, the Federal Trade Commission stepped in. On January 14th of 2026, the FTC finalized a settlement with General Motors and OnStar, with the complaint alleging that GM's enrollment process was deliberately misleading, that GM and OnStar gave consumers false assurance that driving data would only be used for their own safety, while actually selling it to third parties, including insurance companies and data brokers, without appropriate notice or consent. Under the settlement, GM is now banned from sharing driving data with consumer reporting agencies for 5 years and is required to get explicit consent before collecting or sharing connected vehicle data going forward. Then in May of 2026, the California Attorney General hit GM with a $12.75 million fine, the first cash penalty any U.S. authority has ever imposed on an automaker specifically for selling driving data without consent. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton also sued GM for violating the rights of 1.8 million Texas drivers, and separately filed suit against Allstate and their subsidiary Arity in January of 2026 for the exact same type of data harvesting violations. And GM is not alone in this. Senators Ron Wyden and Edward Markey sent letters to the FTC naming several other major manufacturers in the same data broker pipeline, with Honda specifically called out by name. The FTC settlement covers GM only, meaning every other automaker is still operating under no such restriction. I want you to actually sit with this for a moment because I think it is easy to hear these numbers and let them wash over you without connecting them to your own situation. Your vehicle has been building a detailed profile on you, not just where you went, but how you drove the entire time, how often you went over the speed limit, whether you braked hard, what time of day you were on the road, and what routes you take on a daily basis. And that profile potentially already exists somewhere in a database that insurance companies can access right now. The Mozilla Foundation study I mentioned earlier looked at 25 major car brands and found that 92% of them give drivers little or no control over their personal data. And out of all 25 brands they tested, only 2 gave drivers anything close to meaningful control over what was being collected and shared. And here's the part that makes this even harder to get ahead of. Car manufacturers can push over-the-air software updates to your vehicle after you have already purchased it, meaning the data collection capabilities of the car you are driving right now could be expanded at any point without you buying a new car, without you agreeing to anything new, and without you ever knowing it happened. So what is actually changing in 2026? Because laws are starting to move, just not nearly fast enough for a lot of people. Oregon amended its privacy law in January of 2026 to ban the sale of precise geolocation data, meaning car manufacturers operating in Oregon now have to honor driver requests to access, delete, and opt out of the sale of their vehicle-generated data. Oregon joined Maryland in that ban, and Virginia passed a similar bill through its Senate in February of 2026, with several more states expected to follow before the end of this year. At the federal level, a bipartisan bill called the Auto Data Privacy and Autonomy Act has been reintroduced in Congress, and it would prohibit manufacturers from accessing or selling vehicle data without explicit written consent from the owner, and require automakers to allow vehicle owners to see their data, delete it, and opt out of collection entirely. The bill has support from both sides of the aisle, but is not passed yet. 16 states currently have some form of privacy law that covers vehicle-generated data, with 3 more implementing theirs in 2026, but coverage is inconsistent. What you are protected from in Oregon, you may have 0 protection from in the state right next to it. And in states without specific vehicle data laws, the default answer to whether they can sell your driving data is still largely yes. Here is where I land on all of this. The GM and OnStar story. A driver rejected by 7 insurance companies because of data he never consented to share. That is not some rare edge case. That is the system working exactly as it was designed, just without the driver ever knowing they were part of it. The FTC used the phrase egregious betrayal of consumer trust in their own filing, and those are the FTC's words, not mine. What I genuinely cannot get past is the software update piece. I can understand, even if I disagree with it, a car collecting data at the time you buy it based on what you technically agreed to in the paperwork you signed. But the idea that a manufacturer can push a software update to your car while it is sitting in your driveway overnight and quietly expand what they are collecting, with no new consent and no notification, that is a completely different level of problem. You own the car, but you do not own the data the car generates. That belongs to whoever collected it, and right now, that is almost always the manufacturer. $750 billion by 2030 is why this is happening. That is why the privacy policies are buried in thousands of words of legal text that nobody reads. That is why bundled consent exists, where you agree to everything just by downloading the app or activating your navigation system for the first time. Because the data coming out of your vehicle is worth more in the long run than the car itself, and the manufacturers figured that out a long time ago. Alright, the answer to the question I asked at the beginning, true or false? Your car manufacturer is legally allowed to sell your driving data to insurance companies without telling you. The answer, and this is the part that catches most people, is that until very recently, in most states, for most manufacturers, the answer was effectively true. The GM settlement changed it for GM specifically, and Oregon and Maryland changed it within their state lines. But for most drivers in most states right now, the legal protections are still limited, still inconsistent, and still catching up to what the industry has already been doing for years. Go check the comments and see how many people got that right. Here is what you can actually do today. Go to your car manufacturer's app or privacy portal and look for a right to opt-out request. Most manufacturers now have this option, and you can submit a request that stops them from selling or sharing your personal data with third parties. The catch is that opting out may disable certain connected features like remote start or roadside assistance, but at least the choice will be yours to make. You can also request your LexisNexis Consumer Disclosure Report for free. Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, you have the legal right to see exactly what data brokers like LexisNexis have collected about your driving habits and shared with insurance companies. And I want to circle back to where we started. I told my friend about all of this, and his first reaction was, "There is no way that's legal." Now you know the real answer, and it turns out it is a lot more complicated than either of us expected.